Welcome again to another of New Hope's Women's Ministry Program in Search Of, where we search for the intriguing, the informational, and the controversial from a spirit-filled perspective. We're in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and my name is Marie Brathwaite. Today we go in search of I Am Woman. Now, as I researched this subject, I found myself having great difficulty in defining woman as it pertained to me and the other women around me. And I came across something that totally explained what I was feeling. And I'd like to read it to you. It's from Bartley Research Essay. What defines a woman? A question most women ask themselves. Is it culture, the color of their skin, their clothes, education, the way others perceive them? Those being the attributes that might define a woman according to society. Throughout history, women have struggled through gender stereotypes and other discriminations. The way women perceive themselves can affect their lives and the decisions they make. I'd like to introduce my co-host today, and it's our own First Lady, Sister Cindy Paul. And I am so honored to have her come on the program with me. And we just hope that you enjoy what we've put together. First of all, we're going to go through some of our modern day women, and some of our biblical mothers who broke the mold and became not the stereotypical woman. Cindy, you want to start out with who we came up with, because we tried to be very diverse. So go ahead.
Yeah, we had a very broad list. And these are just women from history, right? We'll get to the biblical characters. But one of my women in history that I greatly admire was named Moses. She's not a biblical character, but that's Harriet Tubman, who had the Underground Railroad. She was quite ahead of her time. She was a risk taker. She was a defender of righteousness, right? She was a civil rights activist. So she definitely is on my list of notable female figures in history.
Okay, I'd kind of like to go further back.
Okay.
And, one that the younger folk might not be as in tune with is Queen Victoria. She ruled the largest empire ever seen in the UK, Great Britain. Great Britain and Ireland. And she started at the age of 18. Okay. And until she died at 81. So she ruled a long time. She said, we're not interested in the possibilities of defeat. They do not exist. And I thought, what a saying for us women. We're not interested in defeat. Yeah. The other one I kind of grew up with, because as a nurse, that she was the foundation of what we learned, was Florence Nightingale. Mm-hmm. And she was instrumental in changing the role of nursing and the way we perform nursing. And she was instrumental in making nursing a forefront of the medical field. So yeah, she is one of my women that I greatly admire.
And you couldn't have a list without Mother Teresa, right? Oh, yes. You just could not leave her out. She just was such an example of Christianity. I mean, she really lived her faith. She loved the untouchables, the unreachables.
Yes.
We just would have to include her. Another person that's more, well, I guess I'll come for a little bit, is, of course, Rosa Parks.
Oh, yes.
Mental figure in history for the stand that she took that helped launch a movement. Mm-hmm. Couldn't leave her out.
No. What about Indira Gandhi? I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
What about Indira Gandhi, the first prime minister of India? And those countries do not revere women. So,
yeah, I just saw a movie about her. Very fascinating character.
Yes, yes.
I was so this person, I was thinking of somebody that is a historical figure, which, of course, the Bible is a history document also. And I don't know how well known she is, but have you ever heard of Queen Candace?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so do you remember the Ethiopian eunuch?
Yes. Yes.
He was her treasurer. He was her CFO. And Queen Candace was a bad girl. Alexander the Great was on his way conquering the world, and Queen Candace said, "Not here." She says, "Me and my boys will stomp you out." And Alexander the Great did not go into Ethiopia because he was afraid of that sister. There's nobody to play with. But she's a historical figure, and she's also a biblical figure. As you can tell, I'm very drawn to strong women and women who start movements.
Then how about Shirley Chisholm? She was the first Black Congresswoman, and one of the first Black persons to try for the office of President of the United States, knowing she probably wasn't going to win, but that didn't stop her. And I admire that. You don't look at as obstacles as an obstacle. You keep moving, you keep climbing, irrespective.
Yeah, she was tenacious. I did admire her quite a bit.
Yes, and outspoken and very before her time, I think. If she was around now, she would it would be different. I think she could have made a even bigger impact now if she could have brought her ideas then to the forefront now. Back then, they weren't ready to hear what she had to say, but she didn't let that stop her, and that's what I greatly admire about her.
And she paved the way for so many after her, even our current vice president, but so
Yeah.
many along the way in various leadership positions.
Exactly. I'd like to kind of switch from them to what I like to think is mothers in the Bible. As far as I'm concerned, the whole month of May is supposed to be Mother's Month.
Okay.
And there's some women in the Bible that, back then women were always not highly recognized and whatever have you, but these women made the impact for the children that they bore. And so in honor of mothers, when you're talking about I am woman,
Mm-hmm.
the mothers spoke loud and you heard them roar. First, yeah. Who is your favorite mother from the Bible?
I would have to go with Leah.
Leah. Okay.
Love the story of Leah.
Mm-hmm.
Leah was, I don't know if she was cross-eyed. Something wrong with her eye. And I don't know how shapely or beautiful she was. I just know that she was the one that wasn't chosen. She was like the booby prize. But Jesus came through her line.
Yes.
And I love that, although the Bible paints a very pitiful story for her, not being really desired by her husband, but God had a plan for that sister. So I'd say she's my favorite.
Yes. We studied her story in one of the women's ministry. We have a Bible study, and she was mine to research. That is one of the most fascinating stories you could, her 6 sons became part of the 12 Israel tribes. And yes, and her son Judah, that's the line that you're saying, like Jesus came through. So for all her hard beginnings, what a woman. I think one of my favorite mothers in the Bible is, for me, Hagar.
Mm-hmm.
Some things you read, they say maid, some things you read, they say slave, but this was a woman that really had no control over where her life went, and she was made to either become the concubine, second wife, you read different things, it tells you different things, but she was made to be Abraham's lover, and everything was fine until his wife decided, okay, I got my baby now, I don't need you, and she was tossed aside, and God heard her cry. and then she had Ishmael. And what a story behind that line
Yeah.
that she birthed. So yes, she was one of my favorite, because here it is again, the lesser
Right.
who became
But
really
you just mentioned, how God heard her cry, and another mother that I admire greatly because she was persistent with God, and he heard her cry, was Hannah.
Oh yes.
Poor Hannah. Now, see, she was the opposite of Leah. Her husband loved her. He adored her. He doted on her, but she couldn't give him the one thing that in that time defined femininity, which was a child.
Mm-hmm.
I just love how she was so, I don't know, immersed in her prayer to God that, the priest thought that she must have been drunk because of the passion and fervor that was in that prayer. But God heard her, and, you give a vow to God, you keep it. And she did. And she dedicated that child back to the Lord. So I've always admired her for the way she persisted with God.
And can you imagine, you have children now, and no, they're not going anywhere. They're staying right here with me. I'm not sending them off. And she made that promise and that commitment, and she kept it. And you have to respect that resolve and that commitment to the Lord, to do something like that.
Yeah, you may have children and you don't send them off. And I don't know how often it's done, but I had a friend once that was from the Catholic tradition. And that was common, that one of the children would become a nun and one would become a priest. So I wonder how it would look in this day and age, if in each family, one of the children was dedicated for a life of service. In that.
Well, actually, it would be two.
Oh,
it would be two of them.
But we can't go through famous mothers without mentioning Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Now, that was a woman, and she was a child when you really think about it. But what a woman. And we're here today because of that woman, and yeah, it really exemplifies the fact that it doesn't take age, it doesn't take beauty, it doesn't take brains. It just takes somebody who has dedicated their lives to God, that something good can definitely come out of their line. Can you think of any others?
Mothers, well, this might be low-hanging fruit, but of course, Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mom.
Mm-hmm.
And you said mothers whose children made an impact, right?
Mm-hmm. Because of them, their children made an impact in the world. I always think of Rachel, the mother of Joseph and Benjamin. But when you Jochebed, yes, absolutely.
With Rachel's boy, Jochebed, mother Moses.
Most definitely. Now that was determination. She was definitely, that is a very good one. She was absolutely determined that her son was going to decide. He was going to survive that Holocaust, that we call it, when
yes, it was the Holocaust.
There are many others that we could talk about, but I kind of would like to get into, and I'm glad people are joining in, that we can make this more interactive. I've kind of been saving this one because I'd like to consider the one I think is the most famous.
Most
famous. Yes, or
okay.
infamous, as you might say.
Okay.
And when I think of I Am Woman, I think of Eve, the mother of all. And I find it interesting that women in the Bible, you talk about them as strong women, women who made a mark on history or suffered great trials. And you can talk, when you ask people to name women of the Bible that made a difference, you never hear, at least I have not heard, the name Eve. Eve is always in conjunction with either Adam, she was created from
Mhm.
Adam, or she was the one who, quote unquote, brought sin into the world. Now, we could get into a whole debate about that because I have some very strong opinions about that. But yeah, you really, I would like to talk about Eve so that we can kind of see Eve not as the wife of Adam and not as the woman who brought sin into the world, because she was so much more than that. And when I think about I am woman, I think about Eve. Um, Her name alone means life, life-giving, you know, and I would like to talk a little bit, and I'd be happy to have people join in as we look behind the narrow vision of Eve, to look at her as total woman. Come go with me as we go through some of the stuff that I'd like to delve into and go in search of when it comes to Eve. Um, let me start off, because there's a whole lot, but let's just start off with the first thing is that she was the only woman envisioned and created by God, right? And God had total artistic control when he created Eve. And he was able to put everything that he thought was beautiful into Eve. So when you think about her beauty, you think about, what men consider as beautiful in this day and age. And I think if you put it all together in a container and stir it all up and organize it into one composite, I don't think ever in a million years you can come close to the beauty that God created when he created this beautiful woman named Eve. And she was the crown jewel of all of us, and
If I can just jump in here, when you said
yes.
the crown jewel, something that occurred to me. So God was busy at work that week,
Mhm.
right? He spoke things into existence. He created like Adam from the dust of the earth. Um, Eve was not created from the dust of the earth, because when Adam saw her, he said, "This is bone of my
Of my
bone,
bone.
flesh of my flesh." She came from a living being, right?
Mhm.
Um, God did something completely out of the script when he made Eve.
Mhm.
And I don't know what his standard of beauty is, but when I look, like my brother-in-law, I'm going to give him some PR time. Um, he is a nature buff. I'm looking at Sister Fletcher's screensaver. It's some beautiful poppy flowers. When you just look in nature, at the beauty in nature and the perfection of the environment, right? If the sun and the moon don't stay a certain distance from each other, we would self-destruct. Like, there's perfection in God. And when I think of what we consider beautiful, it just must pale in comparison to what Eve must have looked like. I mean, both of them, and if they were naked and didn't know it, they just radiated. Like, I just don't even have the words to describe.
Exactly. You know,
How beautiful she must have
she
been.
was no wrinkles, no marred by age, you know, no pain, no suffering, just unadulterated beauty. Sister Sylvia, I think had had a question. Go ahead and
Yes,
jump on in.
good evening and thanks. I'm enjoying this talk. But you know, when you're talking about Eve, something is going through my mind. Eve is the mother of all. But when you stop to think of mothers in the Bible, most mothers or most parents, they have, I'm going to say maybe a mentor, somebody to mentor them while they are pregnant or going through whatever, even delivery. I remember sin came into this earth. So Eve had it in a sinful state. Can you imagine how she had to go to learn everything all by herself? I don't know. And my question is, I don't know if God took part in assisting her with that. I don't know. Can somebody talk a little about that?
And I
Definitely.
had Marie.
This was one of the subjects that I was near and dear to my heart, Sylvia, because you know, coming from an OB background, I have seen so many deliveries and so many things that could go wrong. And even when the women have been through their Lamaze classes and their doctor visits, and they've had their mother to school them all along, they get into the delivery room and they act like maniacs. Everything goes out the window. All they see is pain. I want medication. I want my epidural. I want. Okay. She didn't have that. And I know in let me see, in Genesis 4 verse 1, she says that she had I, Cindy, could you turn to it for me? She says it was the Lord, the God who helped her, I think, right?
It says, and Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And
that's it.
I don't know if you can see this. Is so weird. Oh, you probably can't see. I had that verse highlighted because Adam knew Eve, but she said she got the child from the Lord. And before they left the garden, she was told that she was going to have pain and childbirth. Right. And so I was thinking, why did she say that the Lord gave her the child? And I haven't, experienced childbirth, but I've heard enough stories. And I'm thinking it's probably that she was depending on the Lord to get through that childbirth experience because she didn't have a mother, a sister, a doula, nobody to prepare her for what was happening. And I think that's a verse of praise. She's like, thanks be to God, glory be to God. He saw me through this process.
Amen.
Remember also that she did not ask God to bring her into this world. I don't think she asked God to bring her into life, into existence. So she was like thrust. God knows everything best. He knows. So I'm not going to underestimate anything, what God does. But she was like just thrust into this world.
But I think,
and she has to learn everything. I mean, God was leading them up to the point of when they were driven from the Garden of Eden. But after the Garden of Eden, that is where I am a little bit concerned about all the pains, the ache, and they have to learn everything firsthand.
Firsthand. Go ahead, Cindy.
No, I was just, when you talk about learning everything firsthand, it may be kind of silly, but you know how I said earlier, they were clothed in rays of light. After the fall, they had to learn to make clothes.
Yes.
And their first set of clothes were just some leaves, right? And God said, okay, it's not going to be adequate. So God made them some clothes. But just imagine from that time, it took some ingenuity. What do you make clothes out of? She didn't have rayon and silk and cotton. they had to make clothes out of what was available. And I was telling Marie when this thought came to me, don't judge. My great grandmother used to make undergarments out of what did I say it was? Crooked sack.
Yes, Cocoa. Those were the days.
So she could remember the words, so I have to tell her. Yeah, yeah.
But
That
yeah,
was
just I mean the ability to repurpose something that had one original intent and make it for something else, that all started after the fall, when they had to learn, and Eve had to learn to make clothing from what was in her environment.
I'd like to go back just a little, something I don't think we think about. Do you realize that Eve was the first woman to be desired by a man or be aroused? Yes, and I'm going to talk about that. Because that's a part of life. God blessed it. Can you imagine that pure, unadulterated passion for this man that God had given her to? Just to know that he desired her, and I can just imagine the sparks that were flying. And to see, just to think of what God created these two people, and they were absolutely perfect for each other. Can you imagine when Cindy, when you met your husband, did sparks fly and did you see the stars? And I just wonder what it was like for her to be that enamored with Adam.
Somebody said Shoal did. I'm guessing that he's invaded the conversation. So I would imagine, right? So I'm using my imagination, that Eve had passion for her husband, because I will say, for me, like there's like no better feeling than to feel wanted,
yes,
and desired. And I sure did feel that. And when Adam saw Eve, so it's think it was like a surprise party. You watch on TV, like the people come outside and there's a brand new car with a ribbon on it. That's what it was like, because Adam went to sleep. God didn't tell him what was coming. He went to sleep, and when he woke up, there she was. And it's like Adam was said, finally.
Yes.
He's like, that's mine. She's bone of my bone, flesh. He started making all kinds of declarations. He didn't even have parents. He's like, forget your mother, forget your father, go cling to your wife.
Right.
It was like this declaration of love and passion and possession. And I certainly, as a woman, know that level of care and affection would certainly endear you to a person.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Here's another thing that I don't think we remember, that, we know she was the first sinner. Okay. But do we consider the fact that even though she had sinned, the first promise ever made to man was God's promise to her in Genesis 3:15, the promise from God, the first promise from God to a human was given to her directly, and further down, we'll find out that God spoke to only 4 women in the Bible directly, which was Sarah, Rebecca, Hagar, and Eve. God did not consider Eve evil, no matter what she had done. Like the rest of us, she sinned. But the same love that God poured into us, he poured into her to the point that he made a personal promise to her. And I think that for me, that humanizes her. That lets me know that if he could do that for her, what would he do for me?
So I just feel like I need to defend my sister Eve. So, when you say Eve was the first sinner, I was reading in Timothy that Paul said Eve was deceived and Adam sinned.
Yes, I had heard that.
And but the lesson, right? So we've all sinned and done things that I'll say, okay, myself, done things that I regret and wish I could take back, but it certainly cannot compare to the guilt Eve must have felt in knowing that, because of her choice, they don't have clothes. Now they're the first couple suffering eviction. What was a joy and a pleasure, right? Working alongside her husband was pleasurable. Now he's got to toil and sweat. Now plants are dying. An animal died, right? An animal had never died. Some animal had to die that day for them to get clothed. Mm-hmm. Just the weight of that guilt. And then for God to come in and say, Eve, I'm going to make this. I'm going to make a way. Yes. Right? Just an enormous, I think, promise that must have certainly eased her burden, given her some hope. Mm-hmm. And certainly we have that same hope.
Yes, amen. Amen. Another humanizing fact that I thought about was the fact that she was the first mother of a murderer.
Girl, stop.
Oh, I just sent it in the chat, Sister Brad.
Oh, okay. And to know that she didn't lose one son that day. She lost two. She lost both of her sons. Now, can you imagine knowing that your eldest killed his brother? What pain, what agony, what devastation. And we lose a loved one and we feel all those emotions, but we've had people who've lost loved ones who can come and help us and pick us up out of our depression and pick us up out of our total, oh my God, what am I going to do? Let me die with them feeling. Because as a mother, I cannot imagine having to lose one child, but to know I lost two in the same day. And she was not prepared for this. So when we think of Eve, what about that time when she lost both of her babies at the same time?
Unimaginable. That is unimaginable. Mm-hmm. You go back to the promise, mm-hmm. right? That you said God gave her the first promise to a human being. I would imagine that she was taking God at his word more than she ever had before, mm-hmm. since she realized that not taking God at his word, right? So God made her a promise, and I would imagine that when that child was born, that she must have thought, okay, mm-hmm. I have had a child, and this is the child that's going to crush the serpent's head. Mm. And I started thinking about Eve as a mom and the expectations that parents have for their children. I used to be in community services, and I went to a federation, and they were saying a good outreach is for new moms, because when a woman has a new baby, she has all these hopes and dreams and aspirations for the baby, and she wants to get her life on a right track to make sure the child has the best future. And I just think about Eve's hopes and dreams for Cain, and then, came along Abel, and then to realize that Cain, fell into sin. And I just think about, when kids go wrong, I think it was E.E. Cleveland. He was sick of parents calling him, crying, can't sleep at night because the kids went wrong and they did everything they were supposed to do. They had family worship. They sent them to church school and they don't know what happened. I think Eve might have had a sense of what went wrong.
Yes.
And I just cannot imagine what that guilt must have been like.
Yeah, it's like you killed your own child. It's like I killed my own child, and I don't think what could be worse to a mother than to understand that she was instrumental in the events that took her children away.
And with the death of Abel, I had an uncle who died when he was 8 years old. And I still remember, he would have been this age this birthday.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been that age. And I'm like, after decades, it never went away from my grandmother.
Oh.
And certainly she wouldn't be unique in that. No parent wants to bury their child. And Eve was the first mom to experience that, and the first mom to experience loss of a child by violence.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it makes it even worse that the violence came from her other child.
That's she even understood what violence was. They'd never experienced that. You wonder, where did this come from?
Somebody just put in the chat, and she lived another 900 years. That's a long time to have to
live with that.
Can I say something?
Of course.
In Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, it says, "And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of our living." Have you ever stopped to think that Eve, after losing her two sons, have you ever stopped to think that she maybe could have become so depressed that she maybe wouldn't want to have another child?
Yeah.
Because that was awful. That was terrible enough for someone. That was a lot of pain for a human being to go through alone. Only that, she relied on God. I believe that God restored them and everything, even though they were driven out of the garden. But in spite of all that she was going through, God made her for a purpose, created her for a purpose, because the Bible says, Adam called his wife Eve because she was the mother of all living. So right there and then, Adam knew what God's purpose was for his wife. And Eve, I believe in the mind, I don't know, I believe in her mind, she didn't give up.
No.
She did not give up. And she continued, as somebody said, she lived for 900 years after. She became, and she started producing, because the Bible, it was pronounced, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. So right then she started, and she really lived out fulfilled that part of God's plan.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with her. I would imagine that even if she experienced the loss that I think a mother would, and probably the depression, I don't know if they called it that, but I would imagine she did. God still said that that through her seed was going to come somebody that would crush that serpent's head.
Yes.
So there had to be some element of hope. And so I would
I
imagine
think,
what encouraged her to have more children.
right. I don't think she could have made it through if she didn't have that hope.
Yeah.
And that's probably why God made sure she heard the promise out of his mouth, so
I
that
love
she knew it came from the source. And because she depended totally on God, she knew that whatever he said would come true. So she had to move on, because here the two of them were dead. So if God's promise was to come through, yes, it had to come through me. And that was maybe what she had to hold on to, like you said. That's
Mhm.
very, very true. This is what, you know, I wanted to get through. Eve was created perfect, but like all of us, she had a built-in choice. And like all of us, she made the wrong choice. Um, in her devastating choice, God loved her just as he loves us, despite the choices we make. I Am Woman, when you're looking at that title, I Am Woman, I'd like you to look at the total woman. We're not what we look like. We're not our skin color. We're not who we're married to. We're not how much money we have. I Am Woman is a total woman. And for us, we've got to start looking at Eve as a total woman, full of flaws, full of wrong choices, full of hurts, full of firsts. You know, you think of your first remembered lie. Your first remembered, oh, I took that cookie out of the cookie jar, I stole. It makes up the total woman. I just like to read a passage in Proverbs. Proverbs, let me see, 30 and Proverbs 31.
30, 31.
No, I'm sorry. 31, 30, yes, 31, 30. I'm sorry. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Eve made some bad choices, and she made a devastatingly wrong choice, but she feared the Lord. See her as a total woman. And that's what we have for today. Cindy, did you have something more to add?
No, the only thing I wanted to add is, you're right. Eve gets, or she has a bad reputation. But when you told me this was going to be the topic, and I tried to put myself in Eve's place and try to see things from her vantage point, I had nothing but pity. No blaming, no judging. I was thinking she was innocent, although intelligent, right? Much more than we are, but no suspicion. Just not, what's the word I'm thinking of? Not wise to the ways of deception. And you mentioned about the cookie in the cookie jar. You can put everything before us, and the one thing we're not supposed to have is the one thing that intrigues us the most. And if you look at it long enough, if I keep looking at something on Amazon long enough, it's going to end up in my cart and then at my doorstep. But I really do think that we have been too harsh on Eve. And to Sister Sylvia's point, like, I never even thought about a period of mourning after her children died. She is the mother of us all. She
Mother
really
of us all.
us all.
Mhm. Yes. And so we will,
And
somebody
can
said,
I,
yes,
can
go ahead.
one quotation, I just picked it up here, and it says, God's purpose for creation could not be fulfilled without the equal participation of womankind.
Amen. Oh, you got to send where you got that from. I am woman, and there it is right there. So I'm just hoping that this program brought Eve to light in a different way, that we give her the respect and the honor and the understanding, woman to woman, of what she went through. She is just not a bad choice. She was a woman like all of us. And like all of us, yeah, she was deceived. And like all of us who've suffered deception, we all live to regret it. But yeah, my hope for this program was that you just got a little closer to Eve and understood her as a heroine in the Bible, a strong mother, a strong woman, just like all the other ladies that we mentioned earlier. Cindy, thank you. This was very enlightening, and I really appreciate you coming on with me to shed some light into our mother, Eve.
I was glad to be a part of the discussion.
Next month, the Women's Prayer Breakfast comes on June 13th. And our topic is the power of a praying wife and a husband. And so I'm hoping that all the women will bring their husbands along and listen to the prayer breakfast on June 13th. And then on June 24th, In Search of is going in to look for the blended family. And I'm hoping you would join us on that topic and get something out of that. So for us, good night, God bless, and continue to be safe. Put him first. Good night.
Good night.
Nice, thank you.